Frozen faces, snow-choked forests, men locked in the kind of cold that doesn't just sting the skin, but reaches into the bone and rattles the soul. That's how the harshest winters of the Second World War welcomed soldiers who were pushed into landscapes so brutal that even steel refused to bend. And somewhere in that frost-bitten chaos, a little-known invention flickered to life. A pocket-sized spark of genius that kept men alive when the world seemed determined to turn them into statues of ice. A tool so good it should have survived into the present day, but didn't. A tool buried by time, bureaucracy, and changing technologies. By the way, if you love unraveling these long-lost wartime secrets, then stick around and hit subscribe, because we dive into the kind of forgotten history that textbooks abandoned years ago. What you're about to hear isn't just a wartime anecdote. It's a quest, a rediscovery, a fire brought back from the frozen edges of memory. And it might just be the thing that could save you in a winter emergency today. Let's break into the vault. This fire starter wasn't flashy. No polished brass, no elaborate machining, just raw functional design that looked more like a byproduct of a desperate workshop than a battlefield miracle. It was known among a handful of soldiers as the trench heater spark kit, a compact striker and fuel device carried mostly by scouts, sappers and frontline units, caught in long stretches of cold watches. The core mechanism was brutally simple. A hardened steel wheel similar to the striker of a Zippo, but grittier and shaped for gloved hands, was set against a chunk of magnesium-rich alloy. The soldier scraped the wheel sharply, and the resulting shower of sparks bit into the shavings of the alloy, creating a sudden, bright flame, even in conditions where ordinary matches wilted and died. That tiny flash was enough to ignite dry tinder, resin, cloth scraps, or the paraffin-dipped fire tabs some units carried. But its beauty wasn't in the sparks. It was in its stubborn refusal to fail. Wind didn't bother it. Snow might smother, but couldn't choke it. Even frostbitten fingers could operate it when lighters froze in silence. So how did this tool slip through history's fingers? Because wartime innovation often outpaces wartime documentation. Different units improvised their own versions. Some were officially issued, others were crafted in field workshops. When the war ended, mass-produced lighters and later ferro rods became the standard. The trench spark kit, made from alloys no longer cheaply produced and crafted by teams who themselves vanished into the post-war shuffle, simply faded into obscurity. But the story was far from over. To understand its brilliance, you have to see it in action. Picture, if you will, a freezing slope in the Ardennes, or maybe a wind-blasted hillside just outside Leningrad. Snow is a constant enemy. Moisture worms its way into every pocket. Matches crumble. Lighters seize. But, you know, the trench spark kit works like a flint-jawed beast. A soldier crouches low. He cups his hands around the kit. A swipe of the wheel. Sparks explode like tiny comets. A whisper of flame catches onto the magnesium curls, scraped by previous strokes. The fire jumps to life with a brightness that looks almost defiant against the winter darkness. Modern ferro rods produce sparks hotter than the sun's surface. Cigarette lighters flicker flame with the slightest pressure. But you know, none of them combine reliability, compactness and raw simplicity the way this World War II tool did. It was self-contained, resistant to wind, nearly immune to cold. And it operated without the need for fuel refills or external tinder if the magnesium block still had meat left on it. Ask any modern survival expert what the most important aspect of fire starting is in extreme cold, and they'll tell you consistency. You can have the fanciest gear in the world, but if it fails in the one moment you need it, it might as well be scrap metal. The soldiers who used this kit didn't have the luxury of backup supplies. Their survival hinged on a tool they trusted more than any promise from command. In interviews decades later, some veterans remembered the little spark block or the Scout's flame brick, though no single unified name survived. One fictionalized account told of a soldier who said that tool was worth more than the boots on my feet. When trench frostbite became a bigger threat than enemy bullets, the ability to start a fire wasn't just convenience, it was life. Here's where the story gets technical. What made this thing so good? The answer lies in the alloy. The magnesium-aluminum blend used during the war didn't follow today's manufacturing standards. It had impurities, inconsistencies, and hard pockets of minerals. And strangely, that helped. Those impurities caught sparks more easily. The softer magnesium scraped off into curls that ignited like dry leaves. The outer layer formed a natural tarnish that protected the block, but once struck, the fresh metal underneath was an open invitation for flame. The striker wheel was equally clever. Crafted from hardened carbon steel with deep, rugged teeth, it produced sparks even when caked with frost. Unlike modern ferro rods that need a sharp scraper, this wheel could be turned with gloved hands, or even improvised with a knife spine. Everything was built for the battlefield, not the showroom. No elegance, no marketing polish, just a grim determination to function no matter what hell the weather unleashed. But nothing is perfect. The kit struggled in soaking rain unless you had dry tinder stored away. It was also prone to corrosion if left unused for long periods. And the magnesium block eventually ran out, forcing soldiers to find replacements that weren't always available. Still, its reliability in snow and freezing wind made it unequaled for its time. At its core, this tool wasn't a marvel of industry. It was a marvel of necessity. War has a way of forcing humanity into a crucible where old rules melt away and new ideas forge themselves from desperation. The trench spark kit was born from that furnace. It shows us that innovation doesn't always come from laboratories. Sometimes it comes from a cold soldier staring at a worthless matchbox and deciding he refuses to freeze to death. It shows us the power of simplicity, the brilliance of raw materials, and the importance of tools that work even when the world is falling apart. Most importantly, it reveals how fragile our connection to history is. One forgotten invention, misplaced manuals, a warehouse emptied after a ceasefire, and suddenly a life-saving tool disappears for decades, until someone rediscovers it, until someone asks the right question, until someone you wants to build it again. Let's talk modern relevance, because honestly, the truth is, this tool still holds up. In an age of rechargeable lighters and, fancy ferro rods, the wartime spark kit remains one of the most reliable cold weather fire solutions ever created. A modern replica could work even better with today's metallurgy. Imagine, if you will, a magnesium-zirconium alloy with enhanced spark catching, a corrosion-resistant striker wheel, maybe even a waterproof casing inspired by those old ammunition tins. A tool that honours the original, but, well, refuses to be another piece of forgotten history. Bushcrafters could build their own versions with a grinder, a scrap steel wheel, and a block of magnesium. Survivalists could pack it in their winter kits. Even casual hikers could appreciate a fire starter that, frankly, laughs at sleet and snow. Because, you see, winter emergencies don't care about convenience. They care about survival. And the men who carried this tool into the frozen jaws of World War II understood that better than anyone. There are lessons buried in the snow of old battlefields, waiting to be dug up by those curious enough to look. This fire starter is one of them.